spotlight back.
रुक जाइए, उठा दीजिए, हाँ उठा दीजिए।
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأصلي وأسلم على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما نافعا، آمين. Before we move to the discussion about reform and revival, we have one topic remaining from the previous theme, which was about manifestations of intellectual decline. We talked about the economic and social areas, and we are left with only political sphere. The manifestations of intellectual decline in the political sphere. So we have the political sphere. And the divide, political divide in the Ummah, which manifested in the Sunni and Shia differences. We said that in this age, the Sunni state was represented by the Seljuks. And due to their weak economic and political policies, these states did not survive for long. We talked about that in the previous session. So after the death of Sultan Malik Shah in the year 486, the Sunni Seljuk state started to crumble and disintegrate, because Malik Shah divided his rule, divided his political authority between his sons. So this, or it was, they lacked good political acumen and policy, which resulted in this disintegration. So eventually the Seljuk state
Mira, tak payah pergi sampai pergi
was
garaj. Tu apa ni? Pergi garaj.
divided between.
Tak payah sampai pergi garaj. Betul?
So every son controlled a particular area. So we have Barkiyagruk, he controlled the Persia and maintained his dominance on Baghdad. Khorasan, Afghanistan, and the allied areas were controlled by another son, Sanjar. And Halab, the Syrian territory, was controlled by Ibn Tatish. He was another son. And likewise, Dimashq by another son of the Sultan. So basically, this disintegration, it weakened the Ummah. And this was the only state which was representing the Sunni Ummah. And at the same time, the Greater Sham and Palestine is part of that Greater Sham, Greater Syria, which has very great importance in the texts, in the Quran, in the Sunnah, and it has also important strategic relevance in our history. So this Greater Sham was also divided into small political entities between the ruling class and those who represented the ruling class. So Because of this disintegration, political divide, which was the manifestation of which at the highest level was Sunni and Shia states, the Fatimids ruling in Egypt, and the Sunni Seljuks, which started disintegrating, and the Fatimids also did not survive for long. And we mentioned why, we mentioned the reasons. This disintegration led to internal tussle, internal differences, and they destroyed their resources and energies in fighting each other, whether politically, diplomatically, or the battles which happened between these small entities. And sometimes this small political entity would cover a very small region or area. It would not be a big state. So this political divide and disintegration had serious evil consequences in the Muslim Ummah. And this internal weakness was eventually utilized against us by our enemies, particularly the Crusades. So within each state, there were small states, and the tussle between the ruling class has been recorded by the historians of this era. And they would loot each other, they would fight each other, like in our times. So one of the main problems which the Ummah faced in those times was disintegration and disunity, like in our times. The Muslim world, particularly the Middle East, is disunited. Disunited in vision, in mission, in diplomacy, in politics. So every country wants to maintain its power by hook or by crook, even by allying with the West, and nothing unites them. Even the political entities which seem united, like the Arab countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and these, they also have internal divisions. They are not united. Now we can see them united because they share the same interest, or because they're aligned with the West, or at least they're serving the interests of the West. But they also have internal problems or aspirations which cause this division, like the modernization of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia wants to become like Dubai, UAE. Saudi Arabia wants to modernize its economy by all means possible, by good or evil means, so that the big companies, they abandon UAE and they come to Saudi Arabia. This is one of the policies. So they seem united, but they have this internal division and disunity, and it overall it destroys the fabric of the Ummah, and it weakens us against the common enemy or the higher threats. So we see in this era, the historians have mentioned some particular tribes who destroyed the unity of the Ummah. They would loot and plunder. And I have many examples in front of me. And these small imarat, yani these small political entities, they became a curse on the Ummah. So, for example, one of those imarat which have been mentioned by the historians of those times, like Ibn Tigri Birdi, we mentioned him, Ibn Kathir and others, is the Imara of Qabila Bani Mazid. This was a tribe which established a small political entity, and in Iraq, and they became a curse for the Ummah. So he says, Al-Imam Ibn Tigri Birdi, he says, وَكَانَ شَرَّ أَهْلِ بَيْتِهِ يَرْتَكِبُ الْكَبَائِرَ وَيَفْعَلُ الْعَظَائِمِ. They were the most evil of people, evil of tribes. They committed all types of crimes and sins وَلَقِيَ مِنْهُ الْخَلِيفَةُ وَالْمُسْلِمُونَ شُرُورًا كَثِيرًا. The Khalifa himself, and as I mentioned, the Abbasid Khilafah was still surviving, but it was only symbolic. It was very weak. The Khalifa and generally the Muslims, they faced a lot of evil from this Qabila, from this particular Imara. وَأَبْطَلَ الْحَجَّ وَأَبَاحَ الْفُرُوجَ فِي رَمَضَانِ. They even, their raids led to the suspension of Hajj, and they plundered and raped even in Ramadan. وكانت أيامه 67 years. They did this, their Imara, it sustained for 67 years until the Seljuki Sultan Mas'ud killed the leader of this tribe or small Imara in the year 529. This is one example. So Ummah was divided into these small entities, very small entities. A tribe would become one Imara because the umbrella body of the Ummah, Al-Khilafah, Al-Abbasiyya, was only symbolic. It was not there. So when we don't have the unity, Ummah will divide into small entities and start destroying each other. The Umara, so these Imarat and Umara, the leaders, the small political entities, they would survive for their own sake. They had nothing to do with the higher goals of the Ummah. This is what happens when we don't have unity, when we don't have, when we don't foster political, economic, or social unity. We don't cherish higher goals. We only work for trivial matters and survival. Umara of Hijaz, the Arabian Peninsula, the Umara, which were the leaders, political leaders there, the rulers, they would practice nifaq, hypocrisy. Sometimes they would support the Abbasids, the Sunnis, and some other times they would prefer the Fatimids, the Shia Fatimids, based on their political gains and interests. وكانوا يقتلون الحجاج ويأخذون أموالهم وخاصة أمير مكة محمد ibn Abi Hashim. So Ibn Tigri Birdi rahimahullah has mentioned that sometimes they would even kill the pilgrims. These atrocities and destructions have happened earlier also. But the only difference between our times and the history is that now we have recorded history. We can see the destruction online. In those times, it was only written history. Okay? So, and the original sources for us as Muslims are in Arabic. So most of us, we don't have access to these original sources. We don't know the language. And those who know, it does not, written stuff does not create an impact like the videos, which we can see directly in front of our eyes. So he says, وَكَانُوا يَقْتُلُونَ الْحُجَّاج. They would even kill pilgrims. Another problem which happened is the Shia-Sunni divide. The Muslims were not able to negotiate and manage their ikhtilaf. So they entered into a perpetual rift. This perpetual rift between the Sunni Seljuks and the Shia Fatimids. This is a big problem. So basically, survival and political stability, nation building is based on many important principles. One of those principles is negotiating with the enemy. So geopolitics and alliances in politics is not necessarily only based on friendship. We may disagree with a party, we may not agree with their ideology, we may even be enemies, but sometimes we have to create a strategic alliance in order to survive, in order to maintain the, in order to balance the power struggle. If a particular nation, people, political group, political institution, political party does not know the art of this balance, it will never survive. Okay, so you can see, I have given this example before also, the West, in the leadership of United States, which is destroying us in the Middle East, killing our children and raping our women in Palestine and Gaza, it is basically United States. Israel is just a pawn. Israel can not even survive for 1 hour without the help of United States. So you can see how they manage their disagreements. Yahud and Nasara are hand to hand. Or we can say the Yahud, the Jews, are controlling the Christian West, which has not remained so Christian anyways. But still they have this, in spite of their differences in their ideology, in spite of serious ikhtilaf at the core of their religions and ideologies, they are one hand against the Muslims. And we have much in common. In spite of that, we are not able to. I'm not declaring any party good or evil. I'm just stating the facts. This is a reality. We have this divide, and unfortunately, the Sunni world is in slumber. Remember this. Palestine is a Sunni problem. It is not a Shia problem. Shia madhab has its own priorities and preferences. It is well known to those who study Aqidah and the Shia madhab. For them, Najaf, Iraq, and Shia religious places are more important than Palestine, than Jerusalem, Baytul Maqdis. It is purely a Sunni problem. And in history also, it was liberated by the Sunnis. However, we are sleeping. And now the Shia Iran, and this is not we are not blaming them or cursing them in anything. This is their madhab, their present Shia madhab. They are at the front lines against the Jews. This is a big problem. This is a problem and a solution at the same time. So in history also, in this particular age, we lacked this ikhtilaf management, we can call it, engaging with the other, engaging with our enemies. And if we look at the Shia madhab, the majority of our scholars have not done blanket takfir of the Shia. Remember this. Even those who are very strict in these masail, our scholars consider them from the deviant groups. They have deviance in many matters, in Aqidah, in their positions. But our scholars, Sunni scholars, in the past and the present, have not done a blanket takfir of them. Selective takfir is there of particular scholars or extremist groups here and there, but they have not done blanket takfir. So if we believe that they are from deviant, they are a deviant sect, but they are Muslims, and they believe in the same Quran, they believe in the same Mus'haf. Now this is the case with them. They face the same Qibla. Why can't we create a strategic alliance with them? I myself am reflecting, particularly in our times, reflecting on this, the Iran issue, which is very complex. The relationship of Iran, the role of Iran in the Middle East, and the relationship of Iran with Israel and the West. It is a very complex matter, and I have mentioned this many times, that in geopolitics, no narrative is permanent. Today, we can have a narrative, and tomorrow incidents happen, something happens, and the narrative changes. No narrative is permanent. So in these changing narratives and geopolitics, why can't we have some legal, some strategic alliances? It is possible. If the Kafir West can unite on the common cause, the Jews and the Christians, who are the opposite poles, they can do a strategic alliance. Why can't we? This is a question, and we have to see. There are different opinions about Iran in between the Sunnis, and I'm talking about those who matter, not the common masses. Some consider them treacherous, who are deceiving the Sunnis, and some others, they consider them great mujahideen who are fighting the cause of Sunnis nowadays. Yani we should always create a balance in understanding these matters. We are not experts of geopolitics, but this is very important. And the resemblance is very clear. In those times also, we destroyed each other in these internal matters. We may maintain the difference of opinion. We may say, well, we disagree each other. We don't consider each other orthodox. Sunnis don't consider Shia orthodox, and Shia, they don't consider Sunnis orthodox. Like, okay, let's accept this. Let's keep it on the table. But now we have a greater challenge, isn't it? We can do that. It's not a big thing. So this was a very common problem between the Shias and the Sunnis in those times, which created wrong impact on the Ummah. It destroyed our resources, whether human resources, economic resources, and when the disbelievers attacked us, when the crusades started, we were not well prepared. So there were many fitan which occurred. There were many fitan which occurred in these times, and these fitan eventually sometimes led to the military revolutions, like what happened in the year 450. So, for example, another historian of this era, Imaduddin al-Asfahani, he writes in his book Tarikh Dawlati Ali Saljuk, يعني he has compiled the history of Saljuks. He says في هذه الفترة تمت فتنة البساسيري. In these times, the fitna of Basasiri occurred. ودخل بغداد سادس ذي القعدة سنة 450 after Hijrah. He entered Baghdad in this year. He entered Baghdad. So the Shia in the leadership of this Basasiri, they announced the demolition of the Khilafah, and they called for allegiance to the Fatimi Khalifa. So this was a great fitna. He entered Baghdad, and Baghdad was the seat of the Sunni Khilafah, Abbasid Khilafah. As I said, Abbasid Khilafah had remained only in name. He entered Baghdad in the year 450, and he left Baghdad in the year 451. So this year was a year of destruction. He says, وَكَانَتْ سَنَةً سَيِّئَةً كَادَتْ تَكُونُ لِنُورِ اللَّهِ مُطْفِئَةً. It was a year which seemed to extinguish the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فإنه دعا إلى الداء بمصر مصرا ولم يجد الخليفة بمقره في دار الأمانة مقرا. So even Khalifa did not feel safe. Khalifa did not feel safe in his own city. So this Shia leader Al-Basasiri, he created this coup. Yani we can call it coup in our times, military coup, which in which many great commanders of the Sunnis were killed. And the fitna of Basasiri, it continued for a long period of time. And Basasiri, he ruled Baghdad in the name of Fatimids until the Seljuks came and they stopped this fitna. The Seljuks again were a tribe and a family which created the political state. But they were loyal in name, at least in name, to the Abbasids, and they wanted to keep this the Khilafah, even if symbolic in name. They did not declare themselves as Khulafa, but they were practically ruling the Muslim Sunni world. So the Seljuks, they came and entered, and they stopped this fitna of al-Basasiri. And after this, the Fatimids, the Fatimi, the Shia rule, which was in Egypt, it created, after they did not succeed in destroying the Khilafah in Baghdad, because the Seljuks intervened, they created a new form of politics. They formed an alliance with the Ismailiyah, the Batini sect. We have talked about this, the fitna of this Batini sect in the first session. And they created, they went into alliance with this Batini sect and used it for assassinations. And this was a famous deviant sect which used drugs and intoxicants and other means to delude its followers. And they were called assassins, the Hashashin. They would use the intoxicants to delude their followers. So the Fatimids used this politics of utilizing this particular deviant sect in establishing assassinations, doing assassinations of the Sunni leaders. And this had become easier because of the disintegration of which happened in the Seljuki circles, which we have mentioned. Okay, so with the help of these assassins, they took control of many areas of ruled by Seljuks, which have been mentioned by the historians. I will not go into the details here. They took control of many places controlled by the Seljuks. And the Seljuks, they were not able to, because of the disintegration which had happened, they failed in front of this onslaught. Okay, and this also created great fitna until the Mughal came in the year 654. So this was the eastern part of the Muslim world. In the western part of the Muslim world, the Bilad al-Sham, the greater Syria, the Batinids also, the same group, which was supported by the Fatimids, they created destruction and disruption in the Muslim in the Muslim Ummah of that area. So we can see how the political divide happened, destruction, disintegration, particularly the Sunni Seljuks, the Shia, Fatimids, and the siyasa of these two states were not based on reconciliation, strategic alliance, but rather based on animosity and destroying each other. This weakened the Ummah, and it paved the way for the Crusades. And we are talking about the times immediately before the Crusades. So that's why we only see the tip of the iceberg. We see the Crusades coming and destroying the Muslims and the Muslim Ummah. But we forget about the beginning of the story, the weakness which happened. So we can see these are the main manifestations of the intellectual decline, which led to the destruction of economy, society, and the political authority of the Ummah. And it paved the way for the Crusades. So that's for this reason I said that we must understand the very important principle of our history based on the Quran, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change the condition of a nation until they change their own condition. And this is true both ways. Usually this ayah is used to understand the rise from decline. You will never become powerful, you will never become a good ummah until you rise yourself, you change your condition, you work on yourselves. But this is true both ways. Allah does not change the condition from good to evil or evil to good until the people, they change their own nufus, they develop this qabiliyah, they develop this potential of being slaved and colonized. So when they develop this weakness, they destroy themselves, they become easy prey for the enemies. Okay, so this was the only discussion which remained from the previous session. Now let's go to the topic of today's session, which is reform and revival. Inshallah, in the coming sessions, our discussion will revolve around this important topic. How did the ummah revive and reform itself from this weakness and destruction, and eventually it manifested. So the weakness manifests in destruction, disintegration, and weakness. The reform and revival will also manifest in success, political domination. So it eventually manifested in the liberation of Al-Quds. Inshallah, we will come to that. So the first domain in which this reform and revival happened was the political domain. Again, political reform. Now the Seljuk state, which was the Sunni state, they represented the Sunnis, they realized that we cannot move in this manner. If we destroy ourselves and we don't create a policy for reform, eventually the ummah will be destroyed, and with the ummah we will also lose all control. So Seljuks, with the help of scholars, and in particular the Shafi'i great scholars, saved Baghdad from Fatimi incursion. This is the first achievement which they did. The Seljuks, as I said, the Baghdad was controlled by the Fatimids, with the help of Al-Basasiri. And when they did not succeed in it, after that they allied with the Ismaili Batinids, the Batiniya. So Seljuks, with the help of Shafi'i scholars, ulama, let me use the Arabic term, ulama, saved Baghdad from Fatimids. Fatimi incursion. Yes. This was the first achievement. I wrote Shafi'is because they were the most prominent. Otherwise, the ulama generally, they use the ulama. How? This is our topic. How did they engage the ulama? And of course, ulama, they established madaris, they established circles, they preached, they taught, they wrote. And this important alliance between the political elite and the ulama created this reform, which we lack in our times. In some Muslim countries, the ulama are banished, they are imprisoned, they don't have a voice. But generally speaking, we have this gap between the political elite, the state, and the ulama. Ulama are working in their own domain, on individual level, in private circles, and the state, the politics, is on a different track. So what happened was, the Seljuks realized, or it happened by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we need to create this alliance between the ruling class and the scholars. And with this unity, we will create reform in the society. And the first thamara, the first fruit of this effort was saving Baghdad, because Baghdad was the seat of Khilafah. So we have one main name from the ruling elite who established this, or who achieved this. And he was a visionary wazir, visionary political scientist, philosopher, and he was himself the grand wazir of the Seljuks. And his name is very famous, Nizamul Mulk. Nizamul Mulk. This was his laqab, this was his title. The foundation of the state, the foundation of the kingdom. I don't want to go into his biography. You can Google it. And he himself was a great scholar and prolific writer. He compiled many books. You can read about him. Nizamul Mulk was from the political elite. He himself was a scholar. He understood the importance of creating change on the ground. Not only the call of jihad, and no one will respond to it. So in our times, I have heard this, many people saying this, that if the rulers give a call of jihad, everyone will reach Palestine and Palestine. There is khair in the ummah. No doubt there is khair in the ummah, but I doubt this personally. If the rulers, they call for jihad and they want volunteers, we will have a huge number of people, but it will be minority. Why? Because the new generation, the youth of the ummah in our times, their tarbiyah has not been done on these values. The education. We have a secluded class of people who dedicate themselves to studying Islam and Islamic sciences and madaris, and dedicating themselves to teaching Islam and this and that. But the vast majority is about people who inculcate values, secular values, based on secular education. So how do you expect? Otherwise, we don't need the rulers to call for jihad. The least we can do, what we are seeing in Gaza, as a response to that, the least we could do was coming out and protesting. If whole ummah would come out and protest and force their rulers to act on their behalf, it would be a different story. But we have seen how many protests happened. There are many Muslim countries in which no protest has happened, no boycott has happened. The Arab countries, go and see outside the Kaaba. You may have been to Umrah, or you may go to Umrah. McDonald's is there, burgers are there, all products are, no one, I think only few countries here and there, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can count them on fingers, who took this boycott seriously, or people came out. So there are many countries in which no protest happened, or it happened on a very minuscule level. This is the least we could do. So I doubt this, because our education, our tarbiyah has not been done on those lines. So Nizamul Mulk realized this, and he initiated the project of tarbiyah, of education, of creating institutions in which holistic tarbiyah is given to the ummah. And he took the help, or he engaged the best minds of his times, the best scholars. We will come to that. The generation of Salahuddin, as I said, is the tip of the iceberg. He is the official spokesperson of that generation. Every person in his army, every scholar in those times was Salahuddin. It was a generation of Salahuddin was created. It was the thamara, the fruit of this beginning. Nizamul Mulk as a political elite, a scholar himself, involving these scholars in creating institutions, changing, yani engaging in the battle of hearts and minds before we reached Quds and liberated it. And this is very important. So we can see the scholars, the historians again recording what was done. Alhamdulillah, at least we have this recorded history. We can read it, we can learn from it. So Nizamul Mulk, who was the Grand Wazir, or he was the actual ruler himself. He was the mastermind behind this establishment of the Seljuk Empire. And eventually he was assassinated. And this was the consequence of his great acumen, political acumen, and initiating these great projects. For this reason, the scholars have also praised him. Usually you will not find scholars in history praising the rulers. And it is very rare after Al-Khilafah al-Rashida to find the rulers who also have good acumen in knowledge. So we'll see, for example, the scholars would respect him, and he would respect the scholars. He would sit with the scholars, and he had this great mind in uniting the scholars. He did not affiliate with any particular sect or any particular. He was a Sunni, of course, but in Sunnism, he did not affiliate himself with any particular group. He would sit with everyone. He would engage everyone. This was his genius. So the scholars, they say that his majalis, his gatherings, would be filled with scholars and fuqaha and ulama, and some of the political elite would be annoyed with this. These are political majalis, and this is a parliament. Why to engage scholars and ulama? And they would say, as has been recorded by Al-Imam Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, they would say, "Inna ha'ulai shaghaluka an kathirin min al-masalih." These people have deviated you, distracted you from a lot of benefits, political benefits and policies. You have busied yourself with these people. In response to that, he would say, هَؤُلَاءِ جَمَالُ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. They are the beauty of dunya and akhirah. وَلَوْ أُجْلِسُهُمْ عَلَى رَأْسِي لَمَّا اسْتَكْثَرْتُ ذَلِكَ. Even if I make them sit on my head, I would not find it something great. Subhanallah, this was his policy, because he knew that they are my arrows which I will throw at the enemies in reforming the society, in creating the Jeel of Salahuddin. This is what we have forgotten. So because we have developed this emotional thinking, and maybe in giving a vent to our emotions, we see the Turkish dramas and stuff and movies, we think that the reform and revival and liberation of Quds will happen in a dramatic way. And we have developed this ada of dramatizing things. It does not happen in this manner. It takes time. There are sunan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala involved in this dunya. Gradualism is a very important principle. Subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in creating the heavens and the earth, He would have created it in the blink of an eye. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need effort and time. Allah is beyond these weaknesses. In spite of that, in order to make us understand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I created the heavens and the earth in 6 stages, 6 days in the Quran. Because gradualism is important. So even Allah, in creating the heavens and the earth, adopted gradualism. So this is important. If you read his seerah, the life of Nizamul Mulk, they have narrated that he was a very pious and practicing Muslim. And this was not the case usually with the political class and the political elite. And they have mentioned that he would usually, in the gatherings, in his sittings, whether political or with scholars, he would never sit without wudu. He would never sit without wudu. Al-Imam Ibn Athir has mentioned this in his history, Al-Kamil fi Tarikh. He would fast on Mondays and Thursdays. Yani he was a very pious Muslim, educated, a big mind. He was a scholar himself. So basically, what he did was he engaged the method which he adopted. What was the method? The method which he adopted. Otherwise, he was a wazir, grand wazir of the Seljuks. His concern was only policy making, lobbying, geopolitics, creating good politicians, isn't it? Or recruiting for army, maybe. Why did he establish a madrasa? We'll come to that, which was known as a Nizamiya madrasa. He established an educational institution. This is very important. This is what we lack. We need to go back to the roots and understand. In order to reform our societies, create that generation, which we see now in Hamas. Hamas is not an entity which was created in a day or a night. It is the hard work of the Muslihin, the scholars, Sheikh Ahmad Yasin, and the madrasas. Otherwise, this resilience and steadfastness cannot be only achieved by military training. It is great iman, understanding, clarity in thought, ideology. We have seen in the videos on Al Jazeera, alhamdulillah, even the foot soldiers are reciting the Quran, they know the dua. Sheikh Yahya Sinwar himself, may Allah elevate his ranks, he was carrying this, the du'as of morning and evening, the adhkar of supplications of morning and evening with him. He was carrying a rosary, a tasbih with him. Imagine, even in war, fighting on the front lines. What is the message? The message is, the ummah can never be revived until we reform and revive it intellectually. We create these institutions everywhere. We create the human resource. There is a very interesting narration from the great Umar radiyallahu anh. Yani, Umar, no doubt, is a great Sahabi and Al-Khalifa Al-Rashid, the guided Khalifa. But beyond that, he was the best politician, the greatest military commander. His administration, learning from these areas is important because the Roman and the Persian empires were open in his Khilafah. So Umar once, as a Khalifa, he was sitting with his Sahaba, with the near people to him. He asked them, Tamannaw, make a wish. What do you wish the best? They said, one of them said, we wish that we had, they were sitting in the presence of Umar in a room. They said, we wish that we had, this room was filled with gold and we would spend it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umar was not pleased with this answer. He again said, Tamannaw, do you have any other wish? The other person said, I wish that this room was filled with pearls and precious stones and I would spend it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Umar also, he was not pleased with this answer. He said, Tamannaw. They said, well, this is our wish. We want to spend our wealth, ourselves in the path of Allah. And we are not understanding your context. And in response to that, Umar radiyallahu anh, he gave a beautiful answer, which is a very important, or we can say it is the most important principle of nation building. He said, I wish that this room was filled with the likes of Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. Men like Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. And I would conquer the world by them. So he preferred human resource on financial resource, which is important, no doubt, but human resource is better. What we lack is human resource. We lack men. As Ummah, we were never stronger than kuffar in our history. And according to my little knowledge and reading of history, even the seerah, the times of the Sahaba, the battles which happened in the times of the Prophet ﷺ, we were never stronger physically and in military and equipment than the disbelievers. Never. What we had was the best people, filled with iman, intelligent, big minds, politicians, all the Sahaba, and in the history. So the method which he adopted, the primary method, and usually a person would think Nizamul Mulks best method would be recruiting for army because he was the Grand Wazir, or creating politicians. No, the best method which he adopted was establishing institutions of tarbiyah, holistic and comprehensive institutions, where we can say he would create politicians, but politicians with tarbiyah of Islam. And these institutions, the main madrasa which he established was called Nizamiyah. Nizamiyah Madrasa, taken from his name or title Nizamul Mulk. Nizamiyah Madaris. And he created a chain of institutions in order to create political awareness, religion, social engineering, everything in one place. And for this, he recruited the best ulama of his times, like Al-Imam Al-Juwayni, rahimahullah, worked with him. Another great Shafi'i jurist, Abu Ishaq Al-Shirazi. These are big names in Shafi'i madhab. Abu Al-Qasim Al-Qushayri, the famous Imam of the Sufiya. And Al-Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, who was the main and the fruit of this effort. And Al-Imam Al-Ghazali is from the main students of Al-Imam Al-Juwayni. And it is Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, who carried this message and method. He became a school in himself, an intellectual school. And we will talk about him, inshallah, in the coming sessions. How he, when he came to the Nizamiya Madrasa, he was recruited. How did he engage? The method which he created. And Imam Al-Ghazali is often blamed of not engaging and guiding the ummah in his times. Yani, there are those who criticize him for not mentioning and speaking about the crusades which were happening in his times, not dedicating or mentioning the chapter of jihad in his great book Ihya ul-Ulum. We'll come to these questions and answer them, inshallah. So this was the contribution of Nizamul Mulk. He engaged and he created these madaris to create the best minds, and he recruited for it the best scholars, and this effort culminated in the school of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah. We'll talk about him later. However, the decline crept into the Seljuki empire also. Decline happened in the era of Malik Shah. So Nizamul Mulk, he worked with the father of Malik Shah, but Malik Shah did not like the policies of Nizamul Mulk. He was more focused on securing his power for himself and his family. And another reason which we can mention based on the study of the history from the original sources of these times, that the threat of Fatimids manifested in this revival. This is very important. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates difficult situation for the ummah in order to revive, like what is happening now. We are sleeping in slumber. The West is advanced technologically, militarily, everything is happening, and suddenly we are shaken from our slumber. And if someone wrote that we need a dirty enemy like the Zionists to wake us up from our slumber, because we are in deep sleep. The challenges, difficulties, hardships, they carve the individuals, and the nations also. So if there are no challenges, there are no difficulties and hardships, we will perpetually sleep. So some historians, they say, Nizamul Mulk was forced to initiate this, and the revival happened because of the Fatimi challenge. And when this Fatimi challenge and the Fatimids, they they were defeated in the times of the father of Malik Shah, and Malik Shah did not see this as a challenge. He was deviated and distracted to other masail. So he confronted, and there are some clear narrations in which he opposed the policies of Nizamul Mulk. And eventually this disrupted this union between, or the strategic alliance between, the scholars and the political elite. So from the year 470, the unity between the scholars and the political elite started to decline because of the policies of Malik Shah. And he himself, he did not like the method of Nizamul Mulk. So his connections with Nizamul Mulk, also his relationship, it became weak. And eventually Nizamul Mulk was assassinated. And some historians blame Malik Shah himself in this assassination, which is doubted. The narrations are not clear. Malik Shah assassinated Nizamul Mulk, and the divide between the ulama and the political class widened. However, the work which had been already done, it stopped this challenge and fitna. The work which had been already done by Nizamul Mulk with the help of scholars, it culminated in the form of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali. Okay, and the school which Imam Al-Ghazali, the intellectual school, and he himself established a madrasa later, in the later part of his life, in his native place in Naisapur. We'll come to that. This madrasa and what he taught there, the Ihya, that's why his book which he compiled in the later part of his age, he called it Ihya Ulumuddin, reviving the knowledge of religion. So what he saw around him was decline. He wanted to revive this knowledge and create the new generation, leaders and scholars based on this revived knowledge. So this effort of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali was picked by other groups of the Ummah, and eventually the madrasa of, we can say, they became the branches of the primary madrasa of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali, and paved way for Salahuddin himself. We'll come to that. And one of those madrasas was Al-Madrasa Al-Qadiriyah, the Qadri madrasa. We'll come to that, which adopted the method of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali, was influenced by the method of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali, and it paved the way for Salahuddin, eventually the liberation of Al-Quds. How did that happen? Let's keep this for the next session. As we said, we will dedicate 2 or 3 sessions for understanding reform and revival, which is the most important fruit of our discussion. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding of these matters. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us reform ourselves, our families, the communities, the ummah, based on our capabilities. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the great sacrifices of the Ghazan and Palestinian Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them tranquility. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept their martyrs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure their wounded. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by his beautiful names and exalted attributes, give us also resilience and steadfastness like them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free all occupied territories of the Muslim Ummah, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, Kashmir, the Uyghurs of China, and other Sudan. We have many places which are facing difficulties, different contexts, but the problem is same. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us understand these matters and give our effort based on our istita'an capabilities. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure our sick, accept our martyrs, and elevate the ranks of all our dead. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala nabil ummi. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah. If you have any questions, write briefly in the chat box. Relevant questions. If we don't have any questions, we'll meet in the next session with another discussion. Now, we have a question. Can we trust the Shia? It's not about trust. See, again, we are not understanding. The geopolitics is not about trust, about ghairah. And sometimes I'm astonished to see the naivety of the ummah when we see on social networking, where is the ghairah of the rulers? Now, our current state, these terms, they don't mean anything in the politics. Politics, geopolitics is all about interests. Morality has taken a back seat in the current political structure. Morality is important for us as Muslims, but looking at the modern political structure, which is un-Islamic, but we are forced to engage with it. We cannot say, well, let's wait for the Khilafah, the best system. Until then, we don't need to do anything. This is what it is, and we have to engage with it. So it's not about trust. I personally studied many things about Shia and Iran in particular. I don't trust them. I don't like many things about them. But the reality is that they are fighting our battle. Iran is involved. Hezbollah is involved. They are the most powerful, militarily at least, in the region after Israel. There are only two powers, military powers in the region now. Israel, and after Israel, Iran. The Arab countries, particularly the Arab countries surrounding Israel, they don't exist. Very weak. No economy, no political structure, nothing. Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, nothing. So this is a reality. We have to accept it. We have to engage with. That's why I said strategic alliances can happen. Strategic alliance can happen even with enemies. Sometimes we have to sit together on the table in order to solve our problems. We don't trust each other. We don't like each other. We don't accept the ideologies of each other, but we are forced to sit together for a greater cause. This is what I'm saying. Okay, till we have a Sunni power in the region, a Sunni state, which takes the affairs in its hands. We cannot. Now we have only few countries, you can count on fingers, which are directly involved. Everyone knows this. Arab countries are sold out. There is no doubt in it. We have Turkey, Qatar, and Iran. These are the three main countries which we can say are stable and their economies are okay, which are involved in this conflict, which are backing Hamas. Everyone knows this in their own ways. So this will not suffice. What about others? It's very difficult. So what I'm saying is, forget about trust. We don't trust them. Of course, we don't accept the Shia doctrine, which is deviant in our opinion. The Aqidah, some principles, cursing the Sahaba, the concept of Mahdi, their version of this concept, we don't accept it. But the Sunni world, in my opinion, I don't know, will it happen or not? Or is it good or not? Yeah, the politicians and the experts of geopolitics will decide. But in my personal opinion, there is no harm now, looking at the conditions which we are suffering, particularly Palestine, to have a strategic alliance and fight together against the common enemy. After we have succeeded in that, we can later on sit and see to our affairs and clear our problems. This is what I think, and many good people and good intellectuals in our times are saying the same. Okay, so we must understand geopolitics. We must understand the nature of political regimes and interests, things which are involved. So we usually, because we're not aware, we don't read, we don't, generally speaking, I'm not talking about you, me also, we don't know the nature of these things. We fall into emotional analysis and we bring religion into it. These things are not involved. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the best rulers who liberate Baytul Maqdis. But at this condition, at least, unity is very important for us. But can we trust Iran politically? This is not a valid question at this juncture. Once the dust has settled, we can ask this question later. Okay. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Let's stop here. We'll see you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.